On February 15, 2006, a man, while returning from a nightclub, lost control of his yellow Ferrari and crashed it. He got out of the vehicle with minor concussion and fled the area. Just a week later, the same man was captured on a CCTV camera pushing a cart stacked with millions onto a truck after he and his accomplices broke into one of the largest cash depots in the entire United Kingdom and escaped with over £52 million or over $83 million. What happened? How a man who had it all, from mansions to a celebrity status, got involved in one of the biggest cash robberies, and how a crashed Ferrari became a curse long before the crime even took place. In the evening of February 15, 2006, a man with his friends were having a party at a nightclub. He lived a life of excess: women, money, fame, and a shiny yellow Ferrari parked outside. At the time, he had no idea that this car, a symbol of everything he had, would soon become connected to a crime that hadn't even taken place yet. Not because it was an expensive accident, but because it preserved something the robbers never planned to leave behind. On the evening of February 21, 2006, the manager of the UK's largest cash depot, Colin Dixon, was driving home after a long shift. Somewhere along the A249, Dixon noticed a police car following him. On the outskirts of Stockbury, the car's strobe lights came on, signaling him to pull over. Dixon stops at the side of the road. A uniformed officer approaches his window and calmly asks him to step out of the vehicle. Dixon complies. Instead of being questioned, he is instructed to walk over and sit inside the police car. Moments later, he's handcuffed and told to remain silent. The car pulls away, abandoning Dixon's vehicle on the roadside, and begins driving in the opposite direction. A few minutes later, the officer points a weapon at Dixon and tells him not to act smart if he doesn't want to get hurt. Dixon cooperates. The Volvo stops behind a white van near Muirworth, and Dixon is transferred into the van, and the van drives away. At the depot, the next batch of employees were preparing for the overnight shift, unbeknownst to the fact that their supervisor had been arrested. After transferring Dixon, the officers drive east 41 miles to Herne Bay to Dixon's home. At the home, Dixon's wife Lynn and her son were watching TV. The doorbell rings and Lynn goes to attend the door, expecting her husband. As she opens the door, she sees two police officers. Lynn, with a surprise, asks them if everything was alright, and the officers replied, telling her that her husband had been in a very terrible accident, it's an emergency, and she needs to immediately accompany them to the hospital. Lynn, in utter shock and without giving a second thought, picks up her son and quickly rushes to the police car. However, after getting inside the car, she realizes it was not a police car. Before she could react, the car already started moving with its doors locked. She asks the officer what was happening and who they really were. They simply reply that she's being abducted, her husband is absolutely fine, but if she wishes well for her husband, she must cooperate. Lynn and her son are taken to a farm near Staplehurst, the same place where Colin Dixon was held captive. This was the first step in executing the largest cash robbery in the history of UK, masterminded by a man who, on paper, had no reason to do it at all. So the burning question was, what could drive someone to abduct a cash depot supervisor's family and risk everything when he already had a life most people only dream of? Almost 5 months before the heist, in September of 2005, a man went to celebrate a birthday party of his close friend at a London nightclub. The music keeps getting louder, drinks keeps coming, and he blends in like always. The night moves fast. Post-midnight, as he and his friend walks out of the club towards their car, they hear an argument taking place in the parking lot involving a woman and a few other men. They ditch their car and go directly to confront the men, because he wanted to show the other men how powerful he was. After all, he was a rich guy. However, the argument escalates quickly and one of the men pulls out a knife and stabs him multiple times. He collapses on the ground, barely breathing. His friend immediately calls the emergency, the ambulance arrives, and he's rushed to the hospital in critical condition. In the emergency room, the team of doctors watch him flatline as they perform surgery on him. His heart stops almost 3 times before the doctors successfully stabilize his condition. He had a collapsed lung and severe injuries to critical parts of his body. And this man, whose life was hanging by a thread, was a world-class MMA athlete named Lee Murray. In January of 2004, Murray defeated a strong UFC contender, George Rivera, within minutes. He was hailed as a rising star with a promising career ahead. Over the next 2 years, he won several fights, built a reputation, and earned serious money. And a life-threatening incident was not going to stop him from moving forward. Or so he thought. After his full recovery, Murray tried to return back to the training, but his coach declared him unfit for the sport. He might have returned from the dead, but the damage was permanent. And this was the turning point in the life of Lee Murray. He quickly realized that his fighting career probably has ended not in the cage, but on the street over a silly argument. For Lee Murray, the fighting was over, but not his lifestyle, fast cars and private parties. And to keep continuing this high life, he needed money that he no longer had. But he knew how to get access to money using his network. He did not suddenly become a criminal and had an idea to rob a cash depot. He grew up around criminal networks, and many of his friends were seasoned criminals. All he was looking for was the right men to put a team together that could successfully break through the top-tier security of the largest cash depot in all of the UK. The fortress, which at any point had more than £200 million stored in hard cash, was guarded by 80 staff members divided in 3 shifts, 24/7, 365 days. Breaking into such a place with a bunch of men would be equivalent to trying to break into a heavily armed military compound. Murray understood this couldn't be just a normal smash and grab robbery. In the coming days, he put up a team of 6 men, some from his past MMA training sessions and some from his old criminal networks. Between October and November of 2005, Murray and 2 of his accomplices discreetly started conducting surveillance outside the Securitas cash depot, posing as everyday commuters. They started gathering intel regarding the arrival and departure of armored cash trucks, locations of CCTV cameras, and other security measures installed at the depot. They also took note of the shift change and how quickly it would take for the first responders, mostly police, to reach the depot after the alarms are triggered during infiltration. They soon realized that the Securitas cash depot was not located in a random area of Tunbridge. It was strategically built in an area that was surrounded by 3 police stations. They concluded even if they succeed at breaking into the cash depot, they would be quickly surrounded by the police by the time they're out, and their escape would become impossible. Moreover, they had no idea about the layout inside the facility, which would be crucial for planning the heist. They needed a blueprint and a clean in-and-out plan without triggering any alarms. And the only way to accomplish this was to have an inside man on their side. But unfortunately, they had no connections to anyone who might be working at the depot. The solution? They made a plan to create their own inside man. Comes Amir Yusenai, Murray's accomplice, who also had a mutual connection in Murray's criminal network. Murray asks Yusenai to start applying for a security job anywhere he could fit in, just to build a profile in the security service industry. Initially, Yusenai is hired at a local shopping center. By the end of 2005, Yusenai quit his job and was hired at the depot based on his experience as a guard at the shopping center. Murray finally had an inside man working in the largest cash depot as a mole. He had access to staff rosters, cash transfer and storage schedules, exact locations of CCTV cameras and alarm systems, and information about what type of vehicles can and cannot fit inside the loading bay. But Murray wasn't satisfied. He wanted to have a look inside the facility to make his plan foolproof. In January of 2006, Murray went to a local surveillance shop in Derbyshire and bought a small spy camera and handed it over to Usanai. The next day, Usanai attached the camera to his belt and confidently entered the facility for his shift. He made several rounds covering vital areas of the depot, recording everything on his camera, and after his shift, he handed the recordings to Murray and his team. He also gave vital information that a man named Colin Dixon was their supervisor and was in charge of the whole facility. From this point, the story was about to get way more interesting. Dixon's face was captured on Usanai's spy camera so that Murray's team could track him down all the way to his home because according to Securitas protocol, Dixon was trained to never tell his colleagues where he lived and was also required to use 2 different cars using different routes to travel between his home and the depot every other day. By the end of January 2006, Lee Murray had everything he needed to execute the heist successfully. In February of 2006, Lee Murray contacted a woman named Michelle Hogg, who was a professional makeup artist. Murray tells Miss Hogg that he needs a prosthetic makeup job for his new fight and for a martial arts video game production. He also adds that she'll be receiving a very generous amount for this job, way more than what she makes at her salon in South London. And Michelle takes the deal. February 21st, 2006. After finishing the makeup on Murray and his accomplices Lee Russia and Stuart Royal, Michelle leaves. Royal and Russia, with makeup and fake police uniforms, get in their car and arrive at near the depot and wait for Colin Dixon to leave for his home after his shift. Meanwhile, at a farm, 4 other accomplices and Murray in balaclavas, bulletproof vests, and automatic weapons prepare to raid the depot. As Colin Dixon leaves, Royal and Russia start tailing him, eventually pulling him over and abducting him. Over the course of 3 hours, the entire family of Securitas supervisor is abducted by Murray's gang and is held hostage at the farm. At around 12 a.m. midnight, Murray threatens Dixon to cooperate with them if he wants to keep his family unharmed. Dixon had no choice. At around 1 a.m. on February 22nd, Lynn, Colin Dixon's wife, and his son are thrown in the back of the truck while Colin is asked to sit in one of their other vehicles. All 3 vehicles depart the farm and start moving towards Tunbridge to break into the Securitas cash depot. The vehicles split up, and at around 1:21 a.m., Dixon and a gang member dressed as a police officer entered the pedestrian gate. Dixon goes up to the door, rings the bell, and looks through the window inside the control room. Instead of questioning why Dixon was returning at night or why he was with an officer, the inexperienced operator opens the door and lets the 2 men through the airlock into the building. The fake officer quickly apprehends the control room operator and asks him to comply. Meanwhile, Dixon presses the master button to the main entrance gates, and all the gates and automatic bollards retract, which allow the remaining vehicles to enter the yard. All the gang members disembark and run towards the depot. Meanwhile, the truck backs up and parks inside the door of loading bay number 2. Inside the depot, the employees who were still busy working are suddenly interrupted by the armed men and are ordered to kneel down. They are quickly zip-tied and are held in a corner. Meanwhile, Dixon is taken to the vault room door and is asked to unlock the vault using 2 timed keys and a dial. And as the vault door opens, they see £250 million tagged in metal cages. One by one, they start pushing the cages in the back of the truck after moving Lynn Dixon and her son into the depot. It takes them a little over 1 hour to fit 17 metal cages and 2 shopping carts, totaling to a staggering amount of nearly £53 million. Everything is recorded on CCTV cameras, but no alarms go off because they had every employee and the supervisor along with his family under total control. Because Murray's gang could only fit the truck of the size they brought for the heist in the loading bay, they quickly run out of capacity and are forced to leave another 154 million pounds behind. But before fleeing the depot, they move all the employees, including Dixon's family, in empty metal cages, lock them up, and at 2:44 a.m., all three vehicles exit the Securitas premises and vanish in the dark. They fear they might get in a hot pursuit with the authorities, but no one shows up. At around 3:15 a.m., when Dixon gains confidence that the robbers have finally fled the area, he manages to crawl out of the metal cage and runs towards the control room and quickly raises the alarm, alerting the police. The police from all three stations respond to the emergency and quickly arrive at the depot, but by the time, the robbers were gone. The UK's biggest cash depot, surrounded by three police stations, just got robbed by a celebrity athlete without any alarms, complexities, and no confrontation. However, the crumbs they left behind, despite being fully covered and with gloves on, they created a fast track for the authorities who would catch up to them at a speed of a fast sports car. The morning after the heist, the UK authorities announced a £2 million reward for any information. The phone started ringing immediately. One tip led police back to the A249, the same road where Colin Dixon had been abducted. Hidden nearby, officers discovered two burnt-out vehicles. One of them was the fake police Volvo. Fortunately, most of the cars survived the fire. As the police opened the trunk, they found a briefcase, a trash bag, and fingerprints. This bag belonged to Colin Dixon, and it was the first real crack in the case. Within days, more tips poured in. A report regarding a white van abandoned at a hotel car park led the authorities to the vehicle, and inside they found £1.3 million still wrapped up in Securitas plastic, along with a balaclava and an automatic weapon. A third tip from a member of the public came in the same day, mentioning that some metal cages have been dumped near an open car lot. Upon investigation, they found that these cages belonged to the Securitas cash depot. By the end of February 23, 2006, just 2 days after the heist, the authorities had three prime suspects: Stuart Royal, Lee Russia, and Jetmir Butchpapa, all connected to the vehicles found by the authorities. All the men were arrested based on preliminary evidence pointing to the heist. Just 5 days later, the authorities received another tip regarding a suspicious shipping container found in an area called Welling. When the police arrived and opened the container, they found almost £10 million in a trash can, all wrapped up in Securitas color-coded plastic wraps. A few vehicles inches away from the container were registered in the name of another criminal named Roger Coutts, who was also arrested on the suspicion of his involvement in the Securitas heist. And Coutts had direct links to Lee Murray and Murray's best friend, Paul Allen. But both Allen and Murray were nowhere to be found, because by then both had fled to Morocco. The authorities also found prosthetic makeup from Lee Russia's house, eventually leading the police to Michelle Hogg, and she is also arrested on the suspicion of her involvement in the heist. The police, after interrogating Lee Russia, found another £8.5 million stored in a small rental garage only 3 miles away from the depot. Within a week, the UK police had recovered 20 million out of the 53 million stolen from the depot and had 4 men and 1 woman under custody. The authorities also went through all the CCTV recordings of the depot and found that one employee, while on duty, was acting suspicious, making erratic rounds, and constantly looking down at his belt. They figured that this man was Amir Hussaini, hired just a few months before the heist. They arrest Hussaini as well, based on the evidence of CCTV recordings of him filming the facility, breaking all the protocols. Now the only missing suspects were the mastermind Lee Murray and Paul Allen. And because Murray had a Moroccan citizenship, he had no problem purchasing new mansions and luxury cars with the stolen money. Both were living like a king. They even bought expensive jewelry and cosmetic enhancements for the women they partied with almost daily. Back in the UK, the police struggled to tie Murray directly to the heist. Until one day, they remembered something small and insignificant. Murray was arrested in the past for speeding. He had one car that he loved the most, his yellow Ferrari, which he used regularly to go clubbing and driving recklessly on highways for fun. And almost a week before the heist, he had crashed his Ferrari while returning from a nightclub. He panicked and fled the scene. The UK police arrived and impounded the vehicle but did not give any special attention to it. However, after the heist, they remembered that Murray's Ferrari was still in the impound and they immediately went to inspect it. And on the seat of his car, they found two burner phones that actually had a selfie with Paul Allen and two other robbers suspected for the heist. It also had the phone numbers of all the members involved in the heist. And most importantly, he accidentally voice recorded the meetings regarding the entire planning of the heist and how it must be executed. This yellow Ferrari, which was a symbol of his success, ultimately became the evidence, acting as the final nail in the coffin that sealed the deal for Lee Murray and his entire gang. Almost 4 months after the heist, Lee Murray and Paul Allen were arrested by the Moroccan police in Rabat. Murray was sentenced to 10 years in a Moroccan prison. However, due to severe international pressure, his sentencing was increased to 25 years in a maximum security prison in Morocco.